welcome our next duo up to the stage. We've got Avery Jessup with Jordan Brands and Melissa McClary with Leatherman Tool Group. Come on up, guys. Give them a hand. Welcome. Maybe sit home. Maybe sit home.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, it works. Good.
Hi, Avery.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Melissa McClary. I'm the brand marketing manager at Leatherman Tool Group. My background is actually pretty varied. I started out first in the nonprofit space, actually. So started out with the role of most of my job being everything other duties as assigned in my JD. And then from there, went into the agency side and mostly through experiential marketing, so a lot of event-based marketing, a lot of additional smaller company marketing, which means that you also are doing pretty much everything. And then from there, found my way to Leatherman, which is, for those of you that maybe are not familiar, based right here in Portland, Oregon. Our manufacturing facility is literally up by the airport. So it comes in as raw steel on one end and leaves the building a finished tool on the other. We've been based here in Portland, Oregon for 40 years next year. So pretty exciting to be rounding that curve as an Oregon-based company. And I've been with the company for about 4 years now and really feel honored to get to work with our global teams to create really meaningful brand moments and brand experiences for our fans all over the world.
Cool.
So
that's awesome. Avery Jessup, as it says above. I am originally from Detroit, Michigan. Been out here, Detroit. Been out in Portland 8 years. So my career actually started. I was on the food side of the world for about 8 years with Domino's Pizza. So a lot of experience with kind of franchise startups. So I was kind of, I shouldn't say franchise startups, but starting up with franchise with franchisees. So started in Michigan and kind of worked my way throughout the country and then ended up in Hong Kong and overseeing the Southeast Asia business for them. And that's kind of when I met Nike at that point in time. And so transitioned, moved to Portland, I should say. Had no idea what the Northwest was. I just had an affinity for Nike and the brand. But yeah, first time being Northwest and then fell in love. So been here 8 years, started with the company doing strategic planning, and then moved into the kind of marketplace and sales side of the business for a little while on the Nike side, and then transitioned over to the Jordan brand. And then we went through a pretty big reorg about 2 years ago. And then we went to a consumer offense, so a men's, women's, and kids offense, and I was leading men's for Jordan brand. And then most recently, as about a month ago, I lead our marketplace business for Jordan brand on the direct-to-consumer side, and then also our partner side, so our wholesale business as well. So.
Awesome. Well, so when we started talking, we met up and talked on the phone a couple weeks ago, and we started talking about this topic, and you know, what are things that we as larger brands are still doing that are true for maybe smaller brands that are scaling? And one of the things that kind of came up, I think, in the conversation, I think it was, I don't know if it was you or Mitch, I don't remember, but the assumptions, you know, that some people make about how it must be easier when you have budgets the size of ours or those sorts of things. And I think both of us kind of categorically were like, no,
right.
necessarily. And I think that one of the big takeaways is regardless of the size of your brand, regardless of the size of your budget, you're still every day making decisions, making choices about where to put your effort, where to put your energy, because at the end of the day, you could keep yourself super busy, right, with a lot of box checking of tactics, but kind of going back to what Michelle was saying, that strategy without tactics. Yeah. And tactics without strategy, you're kind of lost leader there. So it was interesting when that came up, because I think it started the conversation for us of where do we start when we're kind of divining our path forward every year or in our long-term planning. And I think that it starts really for Leatherman certainly, and I would assume for Jordan too, is that we're just still heavily grounded in what's the objective of our company? What did we set out to do? Why did we create this brand to begin with? So, starting really rooted in that purpose as a company, and then overlaying that with what is our purpose? What do we mean to our consumers and our fans? And making sure that we're really, really grounded in those things, and that's always the guiding star that defines our strategy and is pulled through to our tactics. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but I think one of the things that I know that Jordan does so well, and that is absolutely crucial to the success of the brand, is that authenticity, that staying really tied to your roots and staying really tied to the origin of the brand. And I would just love to hear more about that.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. Even going back to the idea around just budgets and size, I think the last few years, as I think with most folks in here, especially entrepreneurs, was very, very challenging. And I think even for us, being a much bigger brand, as we started to think about what can we do in this space when we need to be much more nimble and not spend like we should be spending, because we don't know how long this COVID environment is going to be. And I think the one thing that we took away from was, how do we get scrappy and get more, how do we just get scrappy, and how do we come to life with our consumers? And in what way can we continue to connect with them when we don't have the budgets that we normally would have in a typical setting? And so that's one thing that I feel like, as we've gotten out of this COVID environment, which we're still kind of in it, was we still need to have that scrappy mentality of being really localized and being really focused on connecting with the consumer in a way that we don't need tremendous amounts of budgets, which we don't have, to stay connected with them. But just to your point around authenticity, I think for us, the one thing that I feel like has made us, I would say, so successful over the past 25 years is being authentic to who we are as a brand. And where we're authentic is basketball and basketball culture. And we always talk about, how do you define what basketball culture is? And it's a hard one to define, but you kind of see it everywhere. You see it in different sports of how people are dressing nowadays, and how people are wearing kind of footwear versus how they were 5-10 years ago, particularly in the basketball space. And it doesn't mean that you don't look outside of new avenues of growth and how you want to grow. And I think that's been something that we continue to push ourselves on as a brand. But one thing that I feel like where we've seen the most success is being authentic to who we were and how we got to where we are, which has helped us be successful.
Yeah, and I'd say that's definitely true for Leatherman as well. We were founded by an engineer. We're still a company led by engineers. So there's this very deep-seated value as far as the way that we look at our products, is that they have to perform, they have to meet all the expectations that we set out for them. But they also have to really meet the ultimate purpose of why we created them, which is to be there when needed and to address the need of the situation. And so that pulls us back oftentimes from things that might be distractions, things that might be seem appealing roads to go down, when it comes to everything from our the way we want to reach out to people, the way we want to contextualize the product, even the way we might want to grow consumer segments, does it make sense for us? Does it make sense for our brand? And how do we make sure that we're building the road there so it connects back to the expectations that people have of our brand? And I think for products like ours, for both of ours, that they're not like consumer goods where you're going to be purchasing them every week. So how do you make sure that you're tying your consumer to your product in a way that they feel a deep sense of recognition in the way that you're communicating with them, and that they feel really included in that? And so, the consumer and our values, they start as the core to our planning, and the strategy is really crucial, that we sit down and we really obsess about what are the things that we are trying to accomplish. And I think one of the things that's really tempting for companies in general of any size is to go down the path of checking every box of every tactic that you could possibly check, and making sure that you're revving on all engines, especially from the marketing side. It's like, okay, we've got blog, we've got email, we've got all these things. That may not be the right way to reach your audience. That may not be the thing that's really going to move the needle. And when you've got limited resources or an audience that is very specific, you need to be very mindful of not getting so caught up in the seduction of like, ooh, I checked a box, I accomplished something today. But is it really tying back to the thing that's gonna move your work forward and is gonna have meaningful results? And so I think for us, that strategy, that very clear objective of what we want to do, that informs our tactics. And every day we have those conversations. I am notorious for killing briefs and killing suggestions that that aren't going to accomplish those things, because we ultimately need to be making sure that we're moving towards those goals.
Yeah, it's a little bit of the same for us too. I think we talked about this in the last segment, just around setting a vision. And your vision should inform your strategy, and your strategy should inform your tactics. And it rings true for, I don't care what function it is, whether it's marketing or operations or what have you. I think a lot of times what we typically do is we start getting in the weeds of tactics and other priorities, and it's not laddering up to the strategy, and it's not laddering up to the vision. So like our vision is to be the most coveted performance and streetwear brand in the world. And it's a lofty goal. We feel like we can achieve it, but some things that we've done is we said, okay, what are those strategies that we have to do that? So we go out and sign some of the best athletes, some of the best basketball players out there. That's going to help us be authentic on the court, because if the kid is seeing basketball products, but they're not seeing athletes who authenticate our brand wearing them on court, it doesn't matter. And the same way in the streetwear space, where I think we've had much better success. But our strategy would be, let's go out and sign athletes, let's do that. That's one click. The second click could be not only just signing athletes, but where are we showing up at a local level, and from a marketing perspective, is it localized basketball programs that we have with youth in New York? That's, if we talk about being more authentic. So I think that gets down to the tactics as well. But I think if you're starting to work through, especially as an entrepreneur or someone that's whether you're a $1 million business or $5 million or $10 million, you start getting too much into the weeds of the tactics and not having it inform your strategy, which doesn't inform your vision. You're gonna be going down a different path that you don't want to go on. One exercise, and I think it's been great that our teams do on a monthly basis, which I instituted. I don't care if you're an entrepreneur or you work for a big company, is we take a look at I put my vision, our mission, vision, and our position of what we want to be in the marketplace and what we want to do on one page in our strategy. And if what I'm doing on a monthly basis doesn't ladder up to that vision, then I don't do it. And I think it's really easy if you're just starting to go, you set out your vision, you set out your strategy, and you just start going, you don't come back to that and revisit that on a monthly basis or what have you. It's really easy to go down a path of where you start to forget what you're really trying to intend to do. So it's just been a helpful process for me. I don't care if it's a white piece of paper and you use a magic marker and just write everything out that you want to stand for, but also coming back to it and revisiting it on a monthly basis or whatever has really been crucial.
And I think that applies too to like when you're thinking through things like distribution, when you're thinking through choices of partnerships or collaborations. That's like the sexy term out there these days is all the collabs. And while there might be some quick wins in some of that, and there might be some quick additions to your bottom line, they're also diverting you from things that may not be where you need to be putting your energy. And so it really does need to be meaningful. Yeah. And if it's not, you have to kind of sometimes have the willingness to walk away from the shiny rocks, right? And like leave them there and know, that it doesn't mean that opportunities won't come, but that you have to be okay with leaving some things on the table.
Yeah, I actually have a friend of mine who runs a small marketing agency in Detroit area. And similar conversation, as they looked at people that they work with, if it doesn't align with their purpose, they don't work with them. And to your point around the bright and shiny object, it was they were talking with a company that one was not aligned with their values, but it could have drastically changed probably their bottom line to a certain extent for a couple of years. But what they said is, we don't want to be in a position where our values are compromised or what
Right.
we're thinking that we're doing or where we want to go directionally, where we want to stand for as a brand. We don't want to go that direction just because it's an easier take for us now versus long term where we want to go. So we're in the same boat. I mean, we look at if you're familiar with the footwear industry now, it's a lot of collaborations. It's been the buzzword is like collab, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on in that space now. And a lot of brands just started doing collabs with entertainers and athletes because it was like the cool thing to do. And I think where we've really excelled in that space is being really intentional again around your values, around who do you want to stand for, who do you want to be a part of and connect with in that space, and do they align with your purpose and your values as a company. And there were some collaborations that we probably could have done that would have helped us tremendously in certain spaces or with consumers that we're trying to capture, but it just wasn't authentic to who we were as a company.
Yeah, and same with distribution points, because there's always going to be opportunities, right, of places where you could place your product, but they may not all be the ones that are most brand aligned. And so, I think that that's also a consideration. One of the other things that we talked about also was, about channel balance and some of those different things. As we all know, the past couple of years has certainly moved forward a lot of digital space, but I think that there's certainly a balance between the retail space and the digital space, and I know that's something that Jordan has spent a lot of time thinking through too.
No, yeah, definitely. It's I would say it's been no surprise. I mean, we've talked about leading with our direct-to-consumer business in a very unique way. Obviously, from definitely a digital perspective, I think the last few years obviously has helped accelerate our focus on digital. But the key aspect for us is we're really still intentional about our partners that we work with. So your Foot Lockers of the world, your neighborhood retailers, your smaller kind of boutiques. And so I think for us, what's been really helpful, and I think is something that is a takeaway, is if you're going to go direct to consumer, what's the role of your direct to consumer channel for you, and what role is that going to play? It should be your best expression. And then if you look at your role of wholesalers or retailers or wholesalers, to your point, in the marketplace, is what role are they going to play for you to help elevate your brand in spaces where you probably can't, or where you probably can't spend that time. And so I think for us is we constantly go through this motion of looking at what are the role of the retailers we want to work with from a third-party wholesale perspective, and then how do we continue to elevate ourselves in the direct-to-consumer space.
And it should be additive, right?
Yeah.
Because to your point, your brand expression, your site, or the activities that you're running, or the experiences that you're putting on, be it experiential or going to the tastings or the samplings that the last panel was talking about, that's going to be your best brand experience. You're always going to curate your best storytelling. You're always going to be the most authentic to yourself. And the retail partners you choose and that you really lean into, they should want to be a part of that, and they should want to support that. And that's important to know, to hold on to the value of what you bring to them as well, and making sure that you're recognizing the interplay there, and the role that they should have should be additive to the work that you're doing, because your brand is bringing value to them as well.
For sure. Question for you. You talked through a little bit in the earlier part just around different tactics you guys use as you think about marketing tactics. How do you decide and discern on what are the tactics that we're going to drive, and where have you seen success, and where have you seen opportunity?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for us, it's interesting because we're a global brand. We're distributed into over 80 countries, and we have to kind of treat each market differently. So they're all kind of in different states of maturity, which is actually kind of fun. It makes it a little bit more exciting for us, because we get to look at the domestic market, where we obviously have a lot of big brand recognition, but we're focused more on things that relevance and consideration phase for folks within that funnel, because we don't lack in awareness, but it's more about where we fit within the individual's use case. But that's not the same in every market. And our application of our product is different in different markets. There's some markets where DIY and outdoor are completely different. I mean, here in the States, we do hunting, and it's, guys with cans of Bud Light and sitting in, tree blinds. And in EU, it's still a fairly elite activity. It's still something, that they're doing in Tweed. So we obviously we're addressing a different purpose and a different functionality. So we're in each market, I think we're making decisions about tactics that are based on the conditions on the ground and based on what that market really needs. And so, we have different phases and different tactical choices. And I think that's for us is looking at what's the need, what's the gap. If it's driving traffic, we're not going to spend a lot of time. Like if we have a website up, but there's only a couple hundred subscribers on that list, we're not going to spend a lot of time spinning up really beautiful retention content, because the place where we need to be putting our energy is in driving traffic to the site and getting people to capture information so that we can engage with them. So beautiful content, beautiful emails are great if you have the audience to engage with them. If you don't, look at the gaps in your process and go back to those places where you have opportunity to really do something meaningful and do something that's really going to ultimately serve you longer in the end. And then once you have the email list, then yes, beautiful content and beautiful creative.
Just a follow-up question, Ed. At what point do you decide, hey, this isn't working? We talked a lot about staying on strategy and making sure you're staying on strategy. At what point do you say, okay, this isn't helping drive our overall business? Because I think there's always it's a challenge to say when is enough, and then when is it, when am I not spending enough time or giving it enough time to actually do what it's supposed to do?
Yeah, I think that we've probably been a mixed bag on that. Like there's some stuff that I think we've done well with that, and some others. Our e-com manager is notorious for quoting, I guess it's something that writers say, where you have to be willing to kill your darlings. So you have to be willing to know when you need to walk away from something. And for us, I think we set pretty clear, again, back to the strategy, we set really clear goals of what it should look like, what success looks like, with really clear KPIs, really clear expectations, and then making sure that we did all of the tactical things that we're going to be able to capture that information. And if it's just not meeting it, we kind of all hold hands and have to make those agreements of this isn't serving us, and we need to move forward. And it's not always easy, and it has varying results. But I think you have to be willing to walk away from things that aren't serving you, for sure.
Yeah, I feel like it's certainly a very interesting balance, because you can say, hey, I think this is where the consumer's going, where our consumers are at, or where we feel like they're going to be going. But it a little bit comes down to the thing that we were talking about earlier, just around like making sure that if at some point you have to be nimble, but also making sure that if it's aligned to your strategy and where you want to go, then stay the course.
Right.
Yeah.
And especially, staying the course when that you've got the sound plan behind it and you've got the logic behind it. Some stuff just takes time, right?
Yeah.
And you got to fine tune it and tweak it. So I'm trying to think what was the other?
I have one for you all. I'd love to just hear, because certainly a lot of entrepreneurs are within start local and go out a little bit broader, and so certainly focusing on your community and where your community is. And so I'd love to just hear how you guys stay very focused on the community and how you guys started, and then obviously from a local level, how that's important.
Yeah, I think the Leatherman story is actually one that is probably very near and familiar to a lot of you, because it's similar to your own. And it's actually really a story of perseverance. Tim Leatherman, who's our founder, there really is a person named Leatherman. So he is an Oregon native. He went to school for mechanical engineering, and he went on this trip with his wife, and there was leaky pipes and all these things. And he literally wrote down in a notebook, put a pocket knife put a pair of pliers into a pocket knife. Like, that was his takeaway. And he came home and he said to his wife, I want to build one just for me. And she said, how long? 3 months. He said, well, 5 years later, Here, 3 years later, he had a working prototype, and then it took him 5 years to find his first buyer. So, imagine that, 8 years of process, of development, of sticking to it. But he knew that he had a product, and then finally, once he got it up and going, he was really committed to keeping the company here and keeping it an Oregon-based company. And so I think that's really part of our DNA, and that perseverance and that kind of grittiness of sticking to our objectives and our plans has really died into the way that we approach the work that we still do, and so it's pretty. Hopefully that's an encouraging story for you, because here we are, the company that we are today, and getting ready to around the corner of 40 years next year. So I think it just goes to show, we started counting once we made the first sale, just so you know. So those first 8 years aren't counted in there. But I think that's a story of perseverance, and again, sticking to your values, sticking to your vision, and that's still really woven into the DNA of the company today.